down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
Okay, has anybody heard of Max Bossa Nova? Bossa Nova. Dang it. Every time I met a real Russian in Ohio, and every time I kept saying Bossa Nova, he's like, isn't that a band? I'm like, don't worry. Does anybody know that band?
Yeah.
Bossa Nova? You're not cool like me.
It's a band.
It's a dance. I don't know what it is, but anybody have any interest in Russian? Anybody interested in learning Russian? Okay, here you go. We have a CD, How to Learn Russia, and a bonus CD on the back.
CD player.
So downstairs in my office exploded. I have thousands of CDs that I'm weeding through, and that Russian CD came through. All of content and anyway. So I met Max not too long ago, a couple years ago, at the local Soul Real Estate Club, and I was just fascinated because I like his great voice. But he actually traded at one time. Are you going to tell your story?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, tell your story. But he traded, lost $1 million on the trading field, and I thought he was going to get killed by the Russian mob. Because that was when I interviewed him, I was like, "So, you're alive? You lost $1 million of someone else's money. I should be clear on that.
You're
Not his money. So he lost a real $1 million, and he still sleeps at night. He lost $1 million, which is so cool. He's got it all back, and he does it with real estate and uses credit cards and finances deals with his credit cards. It's pretty powerful. So get your pens ready. We have a whole outline. If you have a white piece of paper, do you have this white piece of paper?
Yeah, you should,
on the back,
on the table.
I printed on the back of this agenda is more notes. So you flip this page over for your questions, and this is his guide. This is all the content that we're going to go over today. Now, please, we're going to stick to an hour. We got exactly 55 minutes. Please have questions, and if you need them, could you please put your hands together for my friend Max?
Thanks, Steve.
Yes,
for the
sir.
introduction. But yeah, just to tell you just a short history of, I first came here when I was 16 as an exchange student in high school, and then when I enrolled in college, obviously I needed to pay for college, so I found some investors in Russia. Back then they had like 400% inflation, so let's say a construction company usually gets paid up front to build some building, but they don't use the money for 6 to 8 months, and so they needed it to, they basically needed to float it, right? So I made the deal where I had to double the money, and then whatever else I could get above it, I could use for my tuition. I went to Boston University for my undergrad for that, and I was a finance major back then. So, and it was during the late 90s when all the day trading started. So I started a hedge fund back then, and then I got this investor's money, and I basically traded during the day, and then we had another guy in Germany that would then take over for me when I went to bed, and another guy in Japan, and so we could trade 24 hours around the globe, right? And it was during the times when everything was pretty crazy, because I eventually ended up in IT because I had to do a lot of databases and statistical models to do this. So I just kind of learned that, because that's a way less stressful thing, because back during my internship, we used to be like on the trading floor, and everybody's shouting, and there's some refinery in Texas that blew up, and they actually had to shut down all the quotes and say, okay, everybody chill, for 30 seconds, because it's getting too crazy. So, and then people take off at the end of the day, go to Atlantic City, gamble all night, come back and do it again. So I don't think I knew any traders that lasted for more than 2 or 3 years over there, because you just burn out. IT is way less stressful. So I eventually went into that. But so like one day, I actually made my initial. I started with $100,000 that they gave me, and then over the course of a few months, I built it up to $1.2 million, and then I lost it in a single trade. Yeah. Oops. You're right. Yeah, and it was a stupid trade too because basically they automatically sold off my position because the option price was going down so much. The worst part was that by the end of the day, it went back up to 90% of what it was in the morning. So like if they didn't sell it off, I'd still be okay. But so like I wake up, I have a 1.2 million in the account, and then by the end of the day, I owe 60 grand. So I had to start something else to recover that. So, and I still had the tuition to it. It was like 36 grand a semester.
Did you have diarrhea?
I was pretty stressed. Yeah. But and I also had finals coming up and all that. So this was in my junior year in college. So, but I ended up doing, because I did some IT, I ended up doing a lot of consulting for companies, building databases, flying around the country. So that was like my subsidiary. So I had to use that income to pay off my debts from the trading. So, and then that's when I first stumbled on Carlton Sheets. Late night infomercials, staying up, being stressed. So I got his course. And somehow I just ended up not really actually, I had everything set up and got the forms ready, but for some reason I didn't do anything for a few years until I got here in Oklahoma. And then eventually just decided to just plunge into real estate. But during the whole period in college, so what was interesting, like when you're in college and, I'm 17 years old, don't really have any income, and I'm from another country. But back then, you walk down the campus and there's this booth set up, and it's like, hey, I'll give you a free T-shirt if you apply for a credit card. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I want a T-shirt. And I think my first card was the American Express Blue for students. And then at that time, they gave like one free ticket once a year on airplanes to go anywhere in the country. So I thought, well, this is pretty great, So I started looking for some more of those, and eventually, I think the first one was like $500 limit, just for students. But of course, like my first purchase was a book, something about business and real estate, and but then I realized, hey, because I understood that if you use your credit, you actually get more credit. So my first thought was, well, I should be able to pay my tuition with this, because my sponsors back in Russia, it wasn't that stable, because since I had to trade and I had to really make some returns, every semester it was kind of stressful. Am I going to have the money or not to actually pay for the tuition? And then my first thought was, well, I should be able to just swipe a credit card and pay for it, and then then I have more time and leave to actually pay it off. And so I started figuring out how to increase the credit, right? And so at the time I was a RA in the dorms, a resident assistant, and so I just as part of the job, you get to know a lot of people, on the floor. So everybody would go to, like Walmart and get, furniture, clothes, TVs, whatever it is people get, and then all of us 18-year-olds, they just have cash, and I have a credit card. So I see somebody paying $500 for something, for a bunch of stuff. I'm like, okay, give me $500, I'll pay for it. And then I immediately, take that to the bank, deposit, and pay off the card. And then I keep doing that over and over throughout the few weeks. And on my card, they just say, hey, we can raise your limit now to $3,000, and then to more, and then apply for additional cards. And so because it looks like I'm spending a lot of money, but I'm paying it off, so I'm not actually, I'm not racking up any kind of charges or anything like that. And then at one point I got a card that was, I don't know, I don't think they're in business anymore, but probably because of that. But because they didn't have a, normally when you go, like if you use your debit card in the ATM, right, so you get money, whatever you have in the checking account. If you use the credit card, it's like 24.99% interest. And there's a fee, usually like 2 to 3%, just to do it. For whatever reason, they didn't have that fee. They still had the 24% interest. But what I did is I would actually go back then in Boston. I would just go to like this Bank Boston, and in the lobby, I swipe it in the ATM. I had a $500 limit of cash withdrawals. I take the $500, deposit it, and then go back home and pay it. And so just keep recycling like that. And then 2 months later, I call them up and say, hey, can I get a limit increase? They say, sure, and give me $10,000 limit. And at that point, I'm still like 19 years old and still have no job. There's no. And so I'm realizing, you really have to build it up, because the time to ask for credit is not when you actually need it. By the time, because that was the house. You could have your mortgage, 30-year mortgage. You pay faithfully for 20 years, then you lose your job, and you can't make the payment. You only have 10 years left, but it doesn't matter, right? They'll still take the house away. And that's not the time to go and apply for mortgage, because they're going to say, well, you don't have a job, right? It doesn't matter that you have all this equity. They don't care, because it's just easier for them to take over the house. So you want to build it as soon as possible. And then some of the, advantages. So on the outline, I kind of listed, you guys know what the credit, what determines your credit, right? So there's these 3 consumer credit agencies that basically every lender out there reports to them whenever you borrow any money, right? So there's like TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, and they're pretty similar. They have slightly different calculations how they do it. There's also, does anybody know any of the business agencies? Does your LLC have credit? It actually does, but you have to pay for it. So for example, like Dun & Bradstreet, it's like $29 a month. What they do is you can register and you pay them, and they will keep track of everything that your LLC borrows under your LLC tax ID, right? Or like your corporation. That comes in later once you start growing big enough where it actually matters, like if you want to open like a commercial line of credit. So you actually do want to maybe maintain it, but it does cost money. So it's not that cheap. It probably doesn't matter at first, because like for example, a lot of the stuff you borrow, so like if you borrow your mortgage under an LLC name, it doesn't show up on your personal credit, but it does still show up on your LLC. But it doesn't. Your bank will factor that in, and it will affect your credit, because a lot of the times they'll still make you responsible for it. Anything under $2 million, they'll usually make you sign personal liability for any loan. Like once it goes past a couple $1 million, it becomes more like a commercial deal where the deal itself guarantees the loan. But before that, it's usually your personal credit. And so these 3 agencies pretty much kind of control how every lender out there views you. And so I listed a few things that affect your credit. Like the most important thing that does it. So you've all heard of a FICO score, right? So the higher it is, the easier it is to just walk into the bank and get a loan, right? And what really affects it, my wife and I we compete on our FICO score. So she's right now like 7 points ahead of me. It's like, but like ours are like in the 850s right now. So and there's this one. I'll get to that part. There's one part that I still can't affect yet to really get it to 900. But so the most important thing is the one-time payments. So if you ever miss a payment, it dings your credit by many points, like by tens of points a lot of the times. Prior to the Fair Credit Act, back after the 2008 meltdown, it used to be way worse too, because it used to. So if you miss 2 payments, let's say on 2 different accounts, it used to count by account. So let's say you have 10 credit cards, and you missed the payment on one and the second one, right? That would then look like you have 20% of your accounts that basically missed payment. Now the way it's calculated, like in the last few years, it's more by payment. So like they'll actually count. Here's how many payments you have on this card, this card, this card. So if you miss 2 payments, it's now it's a way less percentage. So it's no longer by account. Curve. Right. But it has a much higher weight. So this is probably the most important one. Like if you miss it once, what happens is, because every bank that you have a loan with or a credit card, usually once a month, once every quarter, depending on whatever their procedures, they get your credit just as a routine. And so if you miss it in one bank, all the other banks will know about it. And then they'll immediately clamp down on anything else that they want to do, because it's just going to look worrisome to them. Even if you've been in good standing with them for 15 years, it doesn't matter. They know that with some other bank you weren't. So and they will know about it. And that's why it's a very important one.
Excuse me, when you say miss a payment, you don't mean just late. You mean you don't make it?
No, just late. Late over 30 days.
There's like a grace period, like
30 days. they'll report it 30 days. There's a weight attached to it, so it's like if it's 30 days to 60 days late, it's not as bad as 60 to 90. And if it's completely missed, I mean that affects it, but it can actually drop your credit score by more than 100 points. If you miss the payment.
If you're 10 days late, but they haven't
10 days late,
reported
you
that.
might, yeah, but I wouldn't play with that too.
No.
Right, yeah. Because for one thing, I mean, there's some legitimate reasons you might, you just forgot that you had it. So just for that, if you plan to do anything, if you plan to have more than one card, I mean, use some software, with reminders like Quicken, or Mint. There's a few out there that, Mint is free, and Quicken costs money, but it's worth it to have it because it downloads a lot of different information for you and keeps track of loans, assets, cards, bank accounts, and everything like that. So it's worth it to have something that will remind you to make sure, or maybe set it up as automatic payments, because you really never want to miss that. That's what dings your credit, really. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the criteria, see, like 99% is considered good, and it has to be 100%. Never ever missed in all the years. That will count, put you in an excellent category.
Like, say you are late one time, how long does it take to rebound that? Like, is there
7 years?
7 years?
Yeah.
If you're just late?
Yeah, and bankruptcy lasts for 13 years. So like any kind of defaults, 13 years, missed payments, 7 years. So it'll take a while. I mean, and so it's going to affect you.
Is there a way to remedy that in any way? Can I take that off?
You could always ask. So, like, let's say, for one thing, most lenders, just like all of us landlords, right? Like, if a tenant calls me ahead of time telling me, hey, I'm going to be late, there's a big difference for that than, hey, I haven't heard from you in 10 days, right? And I don't know what's going on. So, like, sometimes they will work with you. In fact, if you look into any of your mortgage companies, I mean, the first thing that they always display, it's like, if you're affected by some, if you're going to be late on your payment, call us right now. Like, make sure you always communicate, and you want to communicate early. But for that too, so basically that implies you have to be planning ahead, right? So like, if you know you're gonna miss it, tell them ahead of time. They'll put some note in there, and they might actually not even report it, because, like, for example, what you could do is you can agree, well, I am going to pay late, right? But I am going to pay on this date. So as long as you do that, they might not even report it. But they have to have some. You would need to reach some kind of like a department head, who would allow that kind of a override.
Have you ever seen anybody remove that from there, like that they were late?
See, it's way harder to remove than to prevent it.
Okay.
So like, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Sounds like having a baby.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. If you know you're gonna miss it, talk to them ahead of time. Don't wait. Don't hope, because nowadays it's all electronic. I mean, it's there. You're gonna have to remove it from all three agencies. So you have to work with all of them, and it's gonna take you longer. So. You have a question?
No, I was just my.
So the second part, and I always say, it's the oldest credit line, right? Now, it used to be where, like, you shouldn't have closed your oldest credit card, even though that's like the worst one you have. It's got $700 limit and doesn't do anything, no points, and But nowadays, it is still on your credit. If you look at your credit report, it's still there. Even though you have closed, but it's usually good to just maintain it. So like, this is the one, like, I'm still missing some of the points that I can't get completely like perfect scores because I don't have the 25 years yet. I still got like 4 or 5 years to go before I can get past that.
What's the highest? 890?
900.
900.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone achieved 900?
I'm sure somebody must have, right? I mean, it's there. The thing is, it doesn't really matter. Once you go past 800, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can walk into any bank and get a loan, for refinancing or car loans or anything like that. No, the car loans are a whole separate thing. That's a big scam out there. But, at least for mortgages, the biggest difference between the credit cards and the mortgages is the credit cards are unsecured. So whatever you spend on them, it's like they can't really actually repossess whatever you bought, right? Because for one thing, it might not have been a thing you bought. You maybe paid for tuition or something, right? So there's nothing they can really do to take back the money. So they do take more risk, and that's why they usually have much higher rates, right, compared to mortgages. But don't ever pay interest on credit cards. I mean, that's just don't do it. Yeah. But so if once this credit line that has the second highest impact. So it's important. So like if you want to start building credit, don't wait. I mean, open something, right? Open a secured credit line. And that would be my recommendation too, from somebody starting from scratch. Like either you're coming off of bankruptcy, some divorce, or some bad credit, or like no credit. No credit is way worse than actually bad credit. I mean, way worse. So to start from, even if all you can do is get a secured line, and what that is basically you put in some money in the bank account that's tied to the card, and then you use the card and you use that money to pay it off. So there's always like a back. Like you usually have to keep like a couple $100, and then you get a $160 limit. And it's more than that.
In the credit unions, you put up $500, they'll give you a $500 limit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay,
you
so
have to
if
set
you
a
could find
separate
one,
account, and then
you basically one for one. Okay, so that's pretty good because credit unions are more like community friendly. Like, so if you can be a member of that, they'll usually have qualifications, right? Like you have to be part of a certain organization or community or whatever. So that would be better because otherwise, you're kind of wasting some of it. But it's still worth it because you have that for half a year, and then you can apply for an unsecured card to get a $500 card, right? Because then see like the credit used is what they're really looking at. Like if you spend, so like if you have your $10,000 limit and you go and spend $10,000 on that card, that's going to spook all the banks. I mean they're going to look at it because at any time when they're running a model on you, let's say right now I have about 19 cards in between. There may be about $400,000 to $500,000 limits, and a couple of them don't even have a limit.
So $405,000 total, or each individual?
Total.
Yeah.
And some of them don't have a limit at all. So like it's
a variable.
It's right. Like they have this tool where you go and say assess your spending power. So like, let's say I need $70,000. I can say like can I spend $70,000? They tell you right away.
So have you purchased a home with a credit card completely, the whole thing?
Yes.
How'd you orchestrate that?
So basically,
like cash out, or did you go to the title company, swipe me, baby?
No.
3.4% on that.
All right. So what you do, you can't hear this in the recording, but so from every credit card you have, you start getting these things right in the mail, and you have to really read them carefully. Right?
Really?
I mean, really read them carefully. So you get these checks in the mail, right? Here's a couple of checks right here, right? So the terms are so like in this particular card, I have $20,000, right? And I can get 0% APR for 18 months. Now the carefully reading is it says enjoy 0% interest for 18 months was a $2% fee. So if I withdraw, let's say $10,000, so like if I write a check for $10,000 to myself or to my company, is this my company? Or? No, this is me. No, yeah, that's it. That's my business. Okay. So if I write $10,000 check, what will happen that month is they'll attach another $200 on top of it as a fee, right? Which, by the way, anybody borrowed money from hard money lenders before, right? So that's 2 points, right? But then after that, there's no 14% interest. It's just zero for 18 months. And then just one time fee. And then guess what? Guess why I have more cards than one? Because 18 months from now, there's another card, and then so it really costs you 1.5% a year, which is better than any mortgage you can ever get, right?
Wow.
So how does it reduce it from 2%? How do you figure that out?
What do you mean reduce?
You said only costing you 1.5%.
No, it's 2% in 18 months. So in 1 year, it's 1.5%.
Okay.
So if you do it, like 4% every 3 years, yeah. So it's
okay.
Basically, if you're doing so let's say this does not work as well with rentals, right? So this is more for flipping or lease options because it is still a short-term financing because. For example, let's say I write a check. So, for example, let's say, let's look here. I have an example of a house. Let's see. Where do I put it? Okay. So let's say we're going to be buying a house, right? The ARV of that house, right, is about $80,000 once it's all repaired and fixed up and everything, right? And so the repairs were about $20,000, right? So we negotiated purchase price at 36, right? So it's good. I'm going to need 36 to buy it and about 20 to repair it, right? And so altogether that'll be about 56,000, right? But it's worth about 80. So it's a decent deal. It's about 70% minus repairs deal. Which, by the way, for all the wholesalers, right, you know how they always say 70% minus repairs. You want to make sure it's not repairs and then 70%. That's different, right? Because you take 100,000, let's say it's 10,000 repairs. If you first subtract repairs, that's 90. 70% of that is 63. But if you go the other way, you first subtract 70%, right? So it's 70, and then 10, so it's 60. So there's $3,000 difference. You want to do it in the right order. But so now we need $56,000 to buy this house, to buy and repair this house, right? Okay. So if you have like two cards that have $20,000 limits on them, maybe $30,000 limits, you should be okay, right? So you write a couple of checks, right? And this checks, but here's the thing.
You write the checks for the acquisition or just
both?
For the repairs as you go to save interest, or do you write like one big check?
Well, that's what I'm going to show you. Okay, so you have to keep in mind, so there's a 2% fee, right? So on $56,000, it's like $1,120, right? So you do need to count that. Now instead of 56, you need 57,100, right? But here's the thing: how long are you going to actually take to repair it, fix it up, and then whether you want to rent it or flip it, right? Let's say it's 4 months, right? So if you want to completely not put any cash into it whatsoever, right? Because here's the thing: just because it's 0%, it doesn't mean you have to. You still have to pay something back every month. Usually, it's between 1.5% and 2% of whatever the outstanding balance. The reason they do that is because if you pay about 1.9% every month, guess how long it will take you to repay? So it's just the minimum payment. Whatever the amount is. It doesn't matter what the amount. Whatever the amount is.
Way more than the 0%.
47 years.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So
that's how they come up with that
That's how
equation.
they come up with that equation. Right?
Fabulous. You gotta love these guys.
So if you only pay minimum payment, they'll take you for
minimum is 1.5% monthly.
Usually 1.5% to 2%, depending on the card that you have, right? So let's say it's 2. Let's take conservative, right? So 2%. That means your minimum payment will be $1,142 here. I have a table, so I'm cheating here. So you have 50. You spend 50. So you bought it for 57. So and you're gonna need to hold it for 4 months, to repair it, right? So on top of the repairs and purchase, you still have this holding kind of like the holding
55.
cost of
55.
paying, another $1,100, right, for 4 months. So that's about extra $4,500. So even though the house
plus
costs
the first points to
right.
write it, okay,
right. So even though the house costs 56, but you need 1,200 for the points, and you need about another 4.5, and let's say pad it another 1,000 for your payments, right? Okay. Just to make sure that you're gonna last for 4 years before you have to outlay any cash whatsoever, right? And so instead of borrowing 56, you need to borrow 63, right? Now, is the house over leveraged? Let's say go to a bank and look at the house. What's going to happen when they pull up? House is paid off. It's very clear, right? Because this is unsecured debt. This has nothing to do with the house. You just wrote a check for $63,000 to yourself, and then whatever you use it for, it doesn't matter.
So can you go and refi on that?
Yes, and here's the best part. So let me give you an example of why you should have this. Right.
Why should we go in debt?
Right. Why you should go in debt? So let's say Mr. Moneybags over here has an IRA, right?
Okay.
That's earning 1% interest on the CD, right? So I'm gonna, come to you and say, okay, I have this fabulous investment opportunity, right? First mortgage, secured by the first mortgage. So I found this house. Let's say it costs it's gonna cost $50,000 to buy, right? Maybe another 20 to fix it up, right? And I'm thinking, I talked to my realtor friends, and they're thinking the ARV is $100,000, right? So I need $70,000 to buy. Now, I did send a couple of contractors there, and I took the average, and I'm saying $20,000. Obviously, there might be some skeletons in the walls and whatever, right? I don't know, but that's what I need. So I'm going to offer you, let's say, 7 to 8% interest secured by the first mortgage, for $70,000 to invest in this house, right? I mean, it's a good deal, right? Because it's worth $100, maybe. Pretty close,
maybe,
right?
maybe.
Right. But here's the second scenario. I come to you and say, hey, 2 weeks ago I bought this house. Well, let's say 2 months ago I bought this house for 50. I thought it was going to cost 18 to fix, but it really cost 20, and we really fixed it up, and it's nice. And I just did the lease, and I just sold it on the lease option for $100,000 for 4 years, 4-year lease option. So, think about this. There's no surprise on the price, right? There's no surprise on the repairs. They're done. Do you need to do an appraisal? No, because
you have a contract.
somebody already. I have a contract for. Yeah, that's it. It's already sold, right? That's the best comp you can get.
Right.
So now I'm giving you exact same opportunities. It's still $70,000, right? I just need $70,000 to refinance my short-term loan, which is this. So I used the check. I bought it. I fixed it up. I sold it. And now I need to refinance the short-term part of the credit
Pay off
card
your credit cards.
for a 5-year loan, let's say, because my lease option is 4 years, let's say, right? So I want to give some slack in there in case people, move out and have to find a new tenant resident, right? But so I just need to refinance my credit card so I can go and do it again.
Okay,
And
so
it's a lot easier sale. This is one of those monthly
so
offers where you can
what's
refuse.
your cash flow now? Because what's your loan and so you get 7% on the 70,000, and you're charging them X amount, so you're cash flowing now,
Right, yeah.
and you get all your debt paid
Right.
off.
You got all of that. But the main thing is it's a very easy selling tool for private money. Because,
Exactly.
right, and you can also do it with the bank. You can go to the bank and say, okay, why would anybody sell me a house for 60% of the value, right? What's the biggest reason people would do it?
It needs repairs.
No, not just that. That's just one of them, right? The absolutely biggest reason is because they need it fast. They need to sell. There's divorce, there's death, there's inheritance, there's repairs, there's no money, there's tax fraud, jail looming in front of you, But whatever it is, you need to sell it fast. So when I come in and say, hey, we can close in 3 days, right? You cannot do that with a bank loan because you can't wait 45 to 60 days until they approve and fund and underwrite and all of that. So whether you then will go and refinance with a bank, which they will want 2 or 3 months of some seasoning, in there, or you go and refinance with a private loan, you need to have an ability to go ahead and buy it first, very quick for cash, right? But it doesn't have to be cash. It could be credit. And if you can't flip it in 18 months, you shouldn't be in this business, right?
Yeah. I've used my checks in that way before, and it does work, but they do put I found that the banks that I take it to want to put like an 8-day hold on it, depending on the amount of the check.
Sometimes, yeah.
How do you get around that?
I haven't had an 8-day one before. I've had 3 days before, but your contract. You need to find that out ahead of time because write your contract here will close in 10 days rather than 3, right?
Okay.
Yeah, which is still pretty fast, right?
One other way that we've done to get it faster is if you do it online. A lot of the same offers and sometimes better offers will actually be on the website.
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah. You just transfer it. The reason you have to really read this offer because sometimes they will say it's not for purchases, it's just for credit, just for transfer. So you can't actually use this to cash it, right? And then here's another part. So my wife and I, we both get this envelope. So this is from American Express. So it gives you 50,000 membership points if you first spend $5,000 in the first 3 months, right? You have to super carefully read. So it's an identical envelope. It's just our names that are different, right? I'm a geek. I go through the actual. I read the whole thing. It had a single line difference between her offer and my offer. American Express has a $450 annual fee, and in mine it said waived the first year, and in hers it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna go through this, and I'm gonna get this $500 bonus, right? But it's gonna cost me $450 to get it. So you wanna read carefully to make sure you don't sign up for those that actually. Well, I do pay some fees because, for example, Chase right now has a really good business card where they give you $800 if you spend $5,000 in the first 3 months, right? That's a fantastic offer. But they do have the unwaivable $95 fee, which is still worth it to me because 800 minus 95, I'm still getting $705. Still better than anything. And what we do is we time it I know I have my insurance bills coming in. I have like 12, 13 grand insurance bills. So like my wife and I both apply for a card right around that time, so that we have something that we can then charge on the card, and then each get $500 to $800.
And you keep track of all that on the software?
Yes, yes. Spreadsheets and software, right? You have to, because for one thing, like American Express, they very explicitly, like in some very, very tiny, like 0.01 font, they say, it's basically, it's like, okay, we know you're going to do this, but don't do this more than every 12 months. So I have a reminder set up that it's like, don't bother applying for this until the 12 months are over, because because it has a fee. Like before 12 months are over, I'm going to call and cancel it, right? Because do any of you know any contractors that take American Express?
No.
There you go. That's my excuse, right? So to close in the card, right? And American Express doesn't do checks. So like Visa, MasterCard, they do this kind of checks. American Express usually doesn't. Like they have like their own those travelers checks, but they cost like almost $100. Like for $100, you get a $50 check. So it's not worth it. But they're okay with you closing. Like Chase does it every 24 months, depending on the card.
Okay, so earlier you were saying we need to keep our oldest credit line open, but now you're saying to close them?
I'll close them all the time. No, but just keep the oldest card. Just keep the oldest
keep the one.
Yeah, that was a question that I have. I have a credit card. When I was 18, just like you, got a T-shirt, and I closed that account. It's still on my credit report.
It'll show up, right?
Is it worth me reopening that card?
No.
So it's too late.
The thing is, back in the days, they actually said that you actually have to have it open, but nowadays, no. I mean, it's in the computer. I mean, it's in there. They know that it's there.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not active. It's fine that it's not active.
But it just shows up on there.
It
So,
just
like
shows up,
on your credit report, you have like 30 pages of closed accounts.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Look.
They're closed.
So let me give you another example, like why it's important to have. Okay. So when I was in grad school, I was on a student visa back then. I'm a citizen now, but like back then I was on a student visa where I was only allowed to work on campus no more than 20 hours, right, at $10 an hour, and that was like the best one I could find. And I actually got like a waiver like for my out-of-state tuition, which was more than like I made in a whole semester, right? So, but still, even with that, my rent was $600. This apartment that I lived in Stillwater, but and I calculated, like if I want to like eat, that's about it. I'd have no money left for it. So, so what I did is, but I had this, because I kept using the credit cards and I kept building up my credit. I got one of those checks, in the mail, for 1 year, 0%. And at that point, I think it was only like 1% fee. At the time, actually, 2 or 3 times in my life, I actually got them where it's 0% fee, which is totally unusual. I mean, like they don't do that again. At all. That was before the financial meltdown. But back then, they still offer those. So what I did is I went to my apartment manager. And as a landlord, who would anybody agree to? Like I said, hey, if I pay for the whole year, would you give me 10% off? I mean, I'd take that any day. I mean, you give me a check right now, yeah, to write it off. So what I did is that, so I figured, so like my rent is $600, right? So it's like $7,200 a year, right? So I got 10% discount. It was like $64.80. I had to pay a fee, right? The 2% fee, $129, right, to write that check. So now I'm out $6,610, right? My minimum payment was 2% a month, right? Which is $132. So instead of having to pay $600 for rent, I only had to pay $132 to the credit card. I mean, I knew, eventually I still had to pay that off, right?
One day,
right? But at that point, I knew, it's. Right now I just couldn't because I wasn't allowed to work. But like, after grad school, obviously I was going to have a job and I was going to get a normal income and start paying that off. But what happened is like for almost 3 years that I was like between college and then grad school, and I had no income. But because I had great credit, I was able to, and because I had multiple credit cards, I was able to kind of shuffle around the money from one to another without affecting my credit. Like, so I never defaulted. I never paid late. but it still looked like I'm using the credit. And even though I had no income, it never actually lowered my credit limit, and I was able to kind of get through this. Like, so when you have like some tough, few months where you have to get through, you can't. But like that wasn't going to be the time for me to go and borrow money, because they were going to look at me and say, who are you? It's like, you don't have any income. We're not going to give you anything, right? But so you have to have it already ready in there. So you need to, and then like if you look at the chart, for example, just how much you need to have credit. Like something like total available credit. Most people think you need to have like this tens or hundreds of $1,000s of credit. I mean, just having $2,500 to $15,000 credit is already average. It's already puts you in a good category. So get a car, get a card or two just to get you to at least that level, and then after that, once you use it, and especially like in all of our businesses, for landlords, you have repairs, you have construction, right? I mean, you got to pay utilities sometimes. I mean, there's enough stuff you can use in a business to just make it look like you're pumping through a lot of money through that credit card and pay for everything.
How long does it take to, like, say you're just starting out, and how long does it take to start getting higher credits? Because you can't go above that 20%, right?
You can ask every 6 months.
Okay.
Right. Here's the thing, too. One of the things that does affect your credit is the number of inquiries and the number of accounts you have. Both of those are still, they're very low. I mean, I do a lot of inquiries, right? But that doesn't always result in, the reason it's two separate categories, it doesn't always result in accounts, right? I mean, you might just, like you go to buy a car, they like ask 3 banks, you get 3 inquiries, but you only get 1 loan, right? If you're going to waste an inquiry, right, which will ding your credit by about 10 to 12 points, right? Every inquiry within the last 2 years. If you have a choice, so like you can either ask to increase your limit, or you can open a new card. I would always go for the new card, because if you're gonna spend on one inquiry for either one, but now you have 2 accounts, and all of a sudden it actually increases your score, and you might actually get a higher. You might get the same limit that you would have been asking to raise anyway. Plus, the reason I would always recommend new cards is because of the different points and reward systems that they have now. So like right now, see, like this one says it's you get 2 points for every dollar you spend, like 3 points on airlines, 2 points on the restaurants and gas stations and supermarkets, and 1 point for everything else. I mean, don't ever get a card that doesn't have any points for anything, because what's the point, right?
Quite literally.
But I mean, the best way to accumulate these rewards is usually opening a new card, because even 3%, even if you're getting 3%, that's gonna, to collect, let's say $1,000 in rewards, you gotta spend almost $30,000, right? And even if it's 3%, then maybe like what, 11,300. It's still a lot of money to spend just to get like $1,000 in rewards, right? But you can get them all, like you can get $500 just by spending $3,000 on something you would have already spent anyway. Don't go buy couches and TVs and stuff just to get points. But it kind of brings us to like discussion like, should you get miles or points? It entirely depends on what it is that you're trying to kind of accomplish. Because when I was a student, didn't have 2 kids, and I didn't mind flying, from like Boston to Seattle and stopping by at Amsterdam, right? And I could get a killer deal. And now it's harder to coordinate. There's 4 of us, to get just the right airlines, and actually flying on the same plane was on the kids, in the same direction. It's much harder to coordinate. I mean, it's possible, but it just takes some real, magic to do it. Which my wife does that. She has all these optimization spreadsheets for stuff like that. But it's much harder. So for us, it's like, okay, you know what? No, I'd rather go for cash points, and then we'll try to look for like some bargain deals on the airplane tickets, rather than using points to fly. But like if you fly a lot, it might be worth it to collect miles. So it just depends what it is that you like to collect your miles, right? You get
I do miles,
Delta
but I have so many miles now that I can't. So now I need to do points.
Yeah, so you could switch, right? Or you can trade them.
Or get a credit card that's just on points
that's
versus
just
miles.
on points,
because I get miles now.
Because too, a lot of cards they have, so like most of my cards have like special categories. So like every quarter, so like they'll give 5%. but it'll be like just for this, so like gas stations and restaurants, right? Or like Walmart or like Amazon and department stores or something like that. And then one card does one list of categories, and another card does another. So like, every quarter we just check and say, okay, so which one? So I just swap them in my wallet, and I'll go around and it's like, okay, so this quarter, my Freedom gives me 5% on gas stations, but like next quarter my city does, and stuff
You
like
have to
that.
wake up every morning and look at your spreadsheet.
It's almost like looking at the weather. What should I wear? What should I do?
Cars should actually
Once a quarter. Yeah. We do have, we have like a short financial meeting with my wife every week.
It's awesome. Your wife's amazing.
Spend like
I want to
15.
meet her.
No kidding.
She should be on the podcast.
She should.
She does. So like, let me give you like an example for this website. I think I wrote it in here. It's called cashbackmonitor.com.
Okay.
So let's say you need to buy a refrigerator, right? And you found this really nice refrigerator that was normally like $1,200 or something like that, right? And of course, don't ever buy it unless it's on sale, right? So by now it's $1,000, right? Because it's Black Friday or whatever. So would you just go to Home Depot and just like pay $1,000 or not, right? So instead, what you do is you go to this website called cashbackmonitor.com, and in there, what you will see, there's like a list, and you guys can see it, but like, so there's cashback, there's travel points, there's credit card returns, and then other reward programs. It's going to list websites that give cashback or rewards, extra rewards for going through their site. And what I do is I type in Home Depot, right? And then I'm looking here. Here's a site called Simply Best Coupons. It gives 4%. Or Mr. Rebates gives 3%. So okay, I'm going to take 4. So instead of going to HomeDepot.com, I'm clicking on this link, going to this Simply Best Coupons, and then I'm going to Home Depot from them. And everything I buy, I'm going to get 4% back. But wait, right? There's more, right? Because I'm also going to be using a credit card, right? That actually gives me another 2%, like something like City Double, right? So now you have 6% discount.
Wow.
On top of the sales price, right? And then and that adds up. Like, we just have that like as a cashback monitor is kind of like the homepage. You go through and okay, I want to go click through. One of the
queen.
like one of the best deals we had too. Like during one of the flips we were doing. That's what we were doing, buying appliances and there's sites like Plastic Jungle or Rise.com or I think I sent you about the Rise.com, right? So where you can buy. So for example, you can go there and buy a Home Depot card, right? $100 card for $94 because somebody just didn't want it. They're selling it, right? But here's what's cool. One time I found on this cashback monitor, I found Rise.com, and so cashback monitor, like if I go through them to Rise.com, they will give me 2%. I don't know how they make money. I still don't know. So I go through them, go to Rise.com, and anything I buy on Rise.com, I get 2% back. So, but what am I buying on Rise.com? I'm using my City Double card that gives me another 2% to buy a $94, like $100 Home Depot card for $94. And back then it was like more like it was more like a couple $1,000 because I needed like supplies for the flip, right? So, so I'm getting 6% plus 2% plus another 2%,
10%,
right? Just to get the supplies, and it's like, well, why not? It's 2 clicks, right? Because what happened on that flip, well, actually, those appliances ended up being stolen. Yeah.
You bought it with your credit card. Did you have protection?
Yeah.
There you go.
I have protection. Right.
That's cool.
And what happened is, it took us, I think it was like almost 3 months. And basically, you're right. So we bought the house, we're renovating it and finally getting the appliances. By the time we got the tenant in there, it's like almost 4 months in. I'm yet to receive a single check, right, for rent. But at the time, we made $800 on the house, just from the rewards.
That's awesome.
So it's still kind of cash flowing, even though I'm just spending money, but it's cash flowing.
Wow.
So.
That's a great story. I have some questions. Is that cool?
Yeah.
All right. So I borrow a lot of money as well from banks, and I know every time I even just call them, they're pulling my credit.
Yes.
Okay. So do they look at you and say, "Wow, you have so much credit with credit cards"? Does that affect you with a bank? What's that conversation where it's like, "Dang, Max, You
No,
got
it
18
does.
credit cards. How does that conversation?
No, it goes into the calculation of the FICO score. No, they know about it.
No, but like I know that, I study credit reports all the time, and so I see when I see a tenant that has like 50 credit cards, I'm a little nervous. I know a banker has looked at your.
It depends what they're doing. I mean, if
they're
like
loaning you
payments,
money. You're buying a house, and they're loaning you money, and they see that you have 19 open credit cards.
Right. That's what.
Have you been denied because of that? Have you had a conversation?
Like my mortgage right now is 2.75%.
Okay, is that through an FHA loan or is that just a conventional loan?
It's conventional.
Cashback monitor.
Would it be on your? Because I'm assuming they would judge you more based on the utilization of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but even though
not
you're
just payment,
dangerous, though,
it's
you have
how do you use
$500,000 open though, unsecured.
This is the
That's
part
a danger. Like if I was going to loan you money,
right.
I'd be like, whoa.
That's the part that scares bankers, right?
That scares me.
Because theoretically, right?
You can go off.
I can go like right now and charge them all, right? And go
buy
to
a country,
go to Panama, right? So,
and
yeah.
I mean,
no, that's how
question.
they judge it. No, that's how they judge it. But see, that's just one. So I see like total available credit, right? It's one of the things, and then credit used.
Okay.
It's those two variables. They're looking at it and say, hey, here's what you have. Here's how much you're using. And we know that you can technically go and charge it, but they also see like how the whole on-time payments and everything that goes, and then the actual utilization because they're going to look back on 20 years of my history and say, well, okay, but you've never done actually that, right? You never like charged them all up and disappeared, right?
But I'm ready.
Well,
you get to 2 now.
It's
Well, okay. You see the checks that you were tossing 10 and 20, 20.
Okay, one thing that so like for example, one of my first deals in real estate was, and it was kind of like a package of 11 properties, right? And there was a landlord that was retiring. He was ready. He had them for some 20 plus years, and I talked to him and said, hey, would you like to sell them to me, and finance them, because he had most of them were paid off by that time for him, right? And he thought about it. Yeah, that would be great, right? So it was like a little over $500,000 loan, and he did want 10% down. Like if I do this with a bank, right, and I go and like write $50,000 check from a credit card, they're gonna say, whoa, like they want to know where the money came from, and they're gonna see, hey, you're just like charging something right before you're closing. That's not gonna fly, right? But with private lenders, they don't care, right? I mean, they're not looking. I mean, I'm yet to have a single private lender actually ask my credit report, even though like I do tell them. I mean, it's
sure.
I'll tell them, hey, I have a high score, and it's most of you who borrow with private money, it's more like trust. It's a relationship with the person you have. It doesn't just happen overnight, and they have to trust you and understand. It is pretty much a handshake deal anyway. But so I needed $50,000, and at that time we were also like trying to buy this short sale that was kind of going through all kinds of crazy legal things, and cash is always utilized somewhere, right? And so I needed another, and then I figured, what, if I'm gonna like tomorrow I'm gonna have this 11 properties, it's like, what am I gonna do? It's like there's gonna be repairs, there's gonna be this and that. It's like I'm not gonna be able to pay for it, so like I don't want to spend I want to keep the cash, right? So I did. I wrote $36,000, on the credit card check, knowing that I have 18 months, and it is gonna. I will need to pay that off. So I pretty much didn't have any profits for the first couple of years once we got those, because it all went back into the repaying the card, the down payment. Mm. But at the same time too, it was only 10% down payment, right? Which ended up being even less for me because I used majority of it was a credit. And we were able to do the deal and close on it.
Awesome. Well, I have a question. So I'm new to this, and someone's here. And how do I get up to 50,000? What should I anticipate? How long will that take? So I can. You've done this for almost 20-something years. Like, for someone that's like just starting out, how long will it take to have a pretty decent sized purse ready to be used?
If you're just starting. Let's say there's no black marks against you. The biggest black mark is you just don't have a credit, right? And then so once you start, within a couple of years you could build it up. For one thing, if you have a company, you should always apply. You should apply because there's your credit, then there's your company credit. They will ask your social and the company social. And they'll just run it for you to make sure that you're not flaky, right? But it's not going to affect the decision on the company as much. So as long as your credit is okay, most of the company cards start with $20,000. Just because it's business. And here the tricky part too. Like they'll ask you revenues of the company, not profits.
Right.
Revenues, which is a big difference in rentals,
Gross.
right? Yeah. They'll ask gross. So it's like, oh, you're looking good. So and then most banks, when you go and apply for a mortgage, they'll let you use 80% of your rents as your qualifying income, right? I mean, does anybody ever keep 80% of their rents?
No.
I mean, that happens. That's, I don't know. Even if they paid off, I don't think you would. But they'll let you do that. So like they will. So for every $1,000 you get in rent, they'll let you use $800 as a qualifying income. So it'll increase your chances of getting a better mortgage. So.
All right, guys. Anybody else have any questions for Max?
Yeah, going along with that total available credit you were just talking about, I'm assuming you're talking about that's just your personal, but non-commercial. I'll say Lowe's LAR that was started a handful of years ago and done in Bradstreet. Are you saying that you'd suggest that we go ahead and try to lock in this $39 a month in order to start?
Oh no, it's not worth it. No, this is something. Once you start needing like $1 million, per deal or something like that, that's when you want to do it, just because it makes you look legit.
Okay.
I mean, this is more for commercial deals.
Do they keep track of you now without that $39?
They do.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like they still, and that's how they send you. Like all the mail I'll ever get from them, it's like, hey, we have this file on you, but it's not complete until you pay us. So.
Have you used any commercial? Say you got a $20,000 Lowe's LAR in this example. You can't really use that with some of these checks and all that, this kind of deals you're talking about, are you?
Yeah,
you can't access that 20.
You can access it.
Yeah.
It's still a company account, right? I mean, I'm using it for the company.
Yeah, it's under a different company name.
I have a Dun & Bradstreet question for you. My father taught me to be damn careful giving him any information at all, because your competitors and the endless chasing lawyers in the world damn sure use it to decide if you're
the size of the company
in a shaky position on a business deal, or if you're worth suing or whatever. So there is somewhat of a two-edged sword to that Dun & Bradstreet stuff, because you don't have any control over who gets the information.
Right. In fact, like if you go on Google for your, let's say you have an LLC, right, like XYZ LLC, you go on Google for it, and then like they will come up as one of the first, and then there's going to be a few other companies that will say, hey, this LLC is about $100,000 to $500,000 revenue, and it's like, well, how do they know? I mean, it might not be accurate, but that's what they think, and that's what they some of the lawyers, they'll do that, and they'll find it's like, hey, it looks like you have some money, right?
One last question: do you do anything to solicit new offers to get you a new credit card each time you're closing an account and recycling to a new one?
Usually, right. So like what I do is I monitor a few blogs, like consumerism commentary, like the Points Guy, just depending on what you try. And I sent you an article, I think, right? Yeah. It just there's a few bloggers out there that keep track of all this stuff. So I look at it and say, oh wow, these guys are giving $800, so I'm gonna go and apply for that. So.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question on credit used on here. You're talking about keeping it below 10%. Now, let's maybe have an example here. We probably have several guys and gals with multiple cards, but we've talked about this before. Say you got the double cash card, 2% check, your go-to card. Let's say you got like a $10,000 credit limit on that card, but I don't, I'm not keeping track of all these 5% quarterly things, and that's kind of your go-to card. You're saying that one should keep that under $1,000 if you can, and just spread
on a $10,000 limit is what you're saying. So it's if you want to keep your credit card 10% below.
If you pay it off every month, it doesn't matter.
Okay, that's.
Well, I'm talking like actually
stretching.
Have a carrying balance.
Yeah.
So you'd rather spread it over multiple. Like it's better to have it over two cards than on one that utilizes.
That's maxed out.
Yeah. But if you're paying, say you're putting $5,000, you put a flip thing on it or something.
Right.
That's totally cool as long as you're paying on the first every month.
Oh yeah. That's right. Because I've written checks. Almost
that's a good question. So he's saying so you're using your 18 months interest only, or that's not. But you're not paying off. You're not keeping it at 10%. That's okay during that.
That's
period?
Okay for that card because see, the 10% applies to the total. That's why you want to have more cards. Because that card. So for example, let's say I'm gonna write $18,000 check on this one, right? And it's a total $20,000 card. Just by itself, that looks bad. Right. But because I have other cards, the total utilization is still below 10.
Okay, does that affect you since because it shows $18,000 on there?
Oh,
but
yeah.
You plan on not paying it for 18 months,
Right.
and
It
you're paying the
affect-
2%
right.
monthly, so that actually kind of dings your credit, except for since you have massive amount
Right.
of utilization, so
Right.
500,000.
It only
you only
dings
have
it,
to,
yeah.
you only
It
have
only
to
dings
be,
it like 2-3 points when it's on one account. But once you have it spread out over many accounts, it's not as much.
What's the most you've ever had out unsecured at one time? Obviously 100,000, because that would be what, 20%, 10%,
The-
20%.
No, the worst I've ever had was 50,000 actual consumer, like when for those 3 years.
Okay.
I mean,
That was
this
long.
wasn't business. This wasn't business. I mean, this was like I was actually paying interest on that one. So
Okay.
like every month, like so, like for my first 2-3 years, once I had like actual decent salary, it's like every morning you wake up and it's like you pay interest.
That's awesome.
I mean, like for houses and for businesses, it's been more than 100 sometimes, but that's business.
Another question.
When you get close to that credit utilization where you're starting to get greater than that 10%, would you recommend opening new cards
Yes.
to get more lines versus
Right.
paying down?
In fact, you'll actually have a pretty good success chance to open, because it's one of those where if you prove to the bank you don't need the money, they'll give you more money. I mean, that's how it works.
Cool.
So I'm all about making all of my purchases through my credit cards, get all the
Right.
rewards too. I've been doing it for like 15 years. I haven't been able to figure out how to get my mortgages through there. Have you been able to figure that out?
Like pay your mortgage
Pay
with a
your
card.
mortgage through your
Well,
card.
think about this. So let's say your mortgage. I mean, right?
Without paying like the 2% or 3% fee to be able to.
No, but think about it, even with 2% fee. I mean, okay, back in the days, like when I lived in Boston, like a great mortgage was 7.5%, right? Like when I used to day trade, everything I left overnight earned 7.5% on the money market account. I'm like, man, this sucks, because it's like total ripoff, right? No, but like by now, the last few years, it hasn't made much sense. But like once your mortgage goes, let's say 4 or 5%, right? If you have a 5% mortgage, you just calculate the payment amount, because basically if you have this 18 months for 0 interest, right? You figure out that it's about 1.5%. Even if you're paying that 2% fee, it's 1.5% per year. So that's better than the more. So like you can take and pay a chunk of mortgage with that, as long as you can still make similar payments. But you get a better rate. Like you no longer. So like let's say you pay off this $20,000 chunk of mortgage, right? And you no longer incurring 5% on it. You now only incurring 1.5% on it.
Sure.
But you have to like really you
really have to
got to really
work
calculate
it.
it like to see if it actually makes sense. Like
Sure.
right now it's
All right.
hard because the
All
mortgage
right,
is
we
a
got
low.
about 2 more questions. Go.
How can you call and get those checks? I mean, can you call up?
Yeah, you can
your-
call.
Oh yeah, you can ask it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually had them shut off.
Yeah.
They kept sending to me all the time. I'm like, dude, stop sending checks, and I haven't seen a check in 10 years.
Well, I've gotten a few, but I look it over and I'm like, yeah, shred it.
No, yeah, you gotta ask
You can
them
call
to
them.
say, yeah.
Anybody else? All right, put your hands together for my man, Mac. All right. Yes, there's some sample tiles, 65 cents a square. Network, talk to people. Please, this guy just paid to be here today. He's not here, but he helped us. Please buy tile and carpet there. Oklahoma Discount Flooring, 405-701-3603. They're in Norman, but they have guys up here. But there's samples over there. Carpet, I use carpet there. All that tile I use over there. So have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at SavvyRadioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook and always be buying assets.